It's an interesting time for business. Tariff and trade policies are dynamic, supply chains are squeezed, and cash flow, it's tighter than ever. If your business can't adapt in real time, you are in a little bit of hurt. So how do you get full visibility and adapt in real time? Over 42,000 businesses trust NetSuite by Oracle, your AI-powered business management suite. It brings accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR all under one roof. NetSuite is the #1 cloud ERP for a reason. It's your single source of truth, giving you the data and control you need to move quickly. Real-time forecasting helps you move into the future with confidence, and with AI built in, you can automate the busy work and focus on strategy. NetSuite helps you see what's stuck, what it's costing you, and how to pivot fast. If I were running a business with a lot of moving parts, I'd use NetSuite for full control over everything. Tame the chaos with NetSuite. If your revenues are at least in the 7 figures, download the free ebook, Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders at netsuite.com/SPI. That's netsuite.com/SPI. You spent months building towards launch day, but when the clock hits 0, your site crashes. Bots swarm, and loyal fans rage on Reddit. That's not good. Fanfare was built to stop that. Fanfare is the drop platform made for high-pressure moments, stampede-proof infrastructure, verified waitlists, and bot filters that actually work. Instead of refunds and rage, you get retention and revenue. And that sounds great to me. Your next launch shouldn't be a gamble. Get Fanfare's 5-step hype drop playbook and learn how to bulletproof your drop at fanfare.io/playbook. Again, that's fanfare.io/playbook.
Try to convince someone that they need something is a lot of work if they don't already believe that they do. Being there when they realize that they need it is much easier. But to try to convince people that they're wrong, basically, and that they don't understand it, it's been easier for me to sort of build the best product out there. And so when someone does come around and say, hey, I need a website for my podcast, and they go into a Facebook group and say, hey, I'm thinking about building this, what should I use? And 9 out of 10 things say, go use Podpage. It's way easier. Like, enough podcasters have had that kind of experience where they're sort of like a mini army now that just helped me.
Why are we all trying to grow so big, so fast, or even grow big at all? Is it possible to have a lean, small, nimble, flexible business that gives you a lot of time in your day, but also still generates passive income? Well, today we're talking with the founder, Brendan Mulligan, who has created a number of different software companies, and one in particular we're going to dive into today called Podpage. It's a website that helps you build websites for your podcast. Very niche within a niche, however, very successful. And it successfully generates enough money to live a very happy life. Yet there are opportunities to grow this bigger, but Brendan founder chooses not to go to them. He doesn't need venture capital. He doesn't want all of that. He wants time and freedom and a stable business. And Podpage is that. And we're going to talk about the journey to Podpage, the number of different softwares that Brendan has experimented with, what he learned from those failed attempts, and what he's learning now. We talk about everything from how he landed on his pricing to everything about discovering that this was the right thing to do, validation processes, the whole 9. I think this will be an incredibly inspiring episode, especially if you're just starting out. And if you've ever thought about creating a software, the one thing you must do before starting it to ensure success, or else you're going to fail massively like Brendan did with his first startup. And we're going to talk about all those things and more here in session 793 of the SPI podcast. And you can find Podpage through our affiliate link if you'd like, smartpassiveincome.com/podpage. Here's Brendan Mulligan.
You're listening to the Smart Passive Income Podcast, a proud member of the Entrepreneur Podcast Network, a show that's all about working hard now so you can sit back and reap the benefits later. And now your host, he just can't get used to calling it X instead of Twitter, Pat Flynn.
Brendan, welcome to the SPI podcast. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. You know, when we had breakfast together with Matt in San Diego, I knew that I wanted you on the show, not just to talk about Podpage and everything you've built there, but just how you've kept everything pretty lean and how you've been able to still manage a very successful business without scaling up and going huge like a lot of us feel like we have to do. And we'll get into those details, I'm sure. But I do want to learn a little bit about your background. What were you doing before you ended up building Podpage, and kind of what was your career like at the start?
Yeah, I think I've always had just an affinity to work with creators. I think that's because I am a creator. I like building things. And so from a very young age, I was interested in, getting closer to musicians and working with musicians. And so in college, I started working on some stuff that I was helping musicians. And then post-college, went into the more traditional music industry. During that period was when iTunes and MySpace were blowing up. And so there was this whole question mark around how to do digital stuff that these musicians who had never had to think about that were starting to have to think about. And so I didn't even really think about starting a company. I just was like, I can build a website that'll help musicians manage data. That was really that was it. I didn't know what startups were, VCs, or any of that stuff. And so that's kind of what got me started. I built a very bad business that I went into a very deep amount of debt into building, but it was to help musicians manage content. And it started this theme that I've sort of continued for 20 years, which is find people who are creating things, help them remove all of the stuff that isn't core to creating the thing that they're creating. There's all these talented people, whether they're musicians or podcasters or artists or, whatever the creative pursuit is, that they spend so much time dealing with sort of the minutia of running that business. And I think it's important to think about as a creator that you do have a business and you have to thinking about how to make a living off of it. There's a lot in every industry I've dug into. There's just so much that's just you probably shouldn't be spending this much time doing this. So it kind of started with music. I built a few startups in the music space. I was lucky to be able to sell them to get out of the debt that they put me in, which is great. That's a win. So I basically got a free education. Then I did a startup in the consumer space that was during sort of the mobile photo sharing time. So Instagram was doing sort of one-to-many photo sharing. We were doing small group photo sharing called Cluster. That's an app. It was never very successful, but it still exists. And it's millions of users and people love it. Someone else is running it now. During that, we started building for creators who were creating apps. So we built a platform for app developers. We sold that to Google. So I spent a couple of years in that sort of giant, resource-heavy, everything moving slow, everything heavily funded type environment. Wasn't really for me. And then left and sort of, it was almost like my PTSD from that got me into, I just want to build things alone for the next year. So I committed. I was like, I'm going to launch one product every month for a year. They have to be simple because you can't build complex things in a very short period of time. And so I built 12 products in a year, 11 of them total failures, barely even made it out of the gate, but learned something from everyone. And one of them was Podpage. And Podpage, again, it was intended to be, for anyone who doesn't know, Podpage is a website builder for podcasts. And it was really built for a friend who had a podcast and didn't have a website. So I just built him this little product over a weekend. And there's enough people that saw it that wanted to use it, that it has grown over the last 4 years into a really nice business.
And when you say nice business, define that for us.
Well, it's a business that allows me to work on it full time, that generates enough revenue to be able to not worry if we want to do marketing things, if we need to hire a contractor to work on something, that's possible to do. So it's not sort of we can retire forever business, but it's a nice business that allows us to live a nice life and also have a very small team and a very small set of resources to continue pushing it forward.
It's so interesting because when I hear a lot of stories from startups and software companies that grow really big, a lot of times they're at a point where they go, well, I just wish I was lean and it was just like me and a couple other people. That's ultimately what I wish this was, because this has grown out of control. It seems like you've been in environments where things have grown big and there's a lot of people. What would you say are the downsides that people who are getting started and they're excited about this kind of world that they're not seeing? Can you help them understand what the future might be like if they perhaps go down that path and it's not for them?
Well, it's funny because what was 10 years ago is different today. And especially with AI, what's going to be possible in 12 months to 5 years from now is different for startup founders.
Sure.
12 years ago, mobile was hot. And so in order to build anything, you needed to have an iOS developer, a backend developer, a designer, a web developer, maybe an Android developer. So you needed to raise venture capital because you needed to pay all these people. The expectation from the market for most of those things was that they would be free. And so it was very much like build a bigger team, raise money, grow this to be big, then probably sell it. That was generally the model. And the encouragement from the industry. That was what was rewarded from the press, that was just what people were excited about. I think that over the last few years, there's been a big difference where the leaner that you can keep something, the more options you have. I think that's what a lot of people realized. Our issue, we raised a bunch of venture capital. And at the end of the sort of experience, it was, well, we could have walked away and not given any money back, but it was important for us to make our venture capitalists whole. we were kind of exhausted after doing it for 3 years. And so when we sold our company to Google, it was a moderate outcome for the team. We all got amazing jobs. We all got a bit of a bonus for working on what we've been working on. We would have been better off going to Google 5 years prior and just working there for 5 years. That would have been a better financial outcome.
Interesting.
But when we sold to Google, we were able to pay our investors back. So we felt like, we that was a big thing that we wanted to do. And then we all like, okay, cool. Now we can go and we can try something different. And again, like we just learned so much. Like it was a massive win for us, even though it wasn't billionaires on yachts type win. It was just like, this is great. We're very lucky. There's a lot of startups that don't get that opportunity. But I think it also made us think like, God, it would have been really cool to like be a little bit more of a masters of our own destiny. And that would have been harder up front, right? We were able to start a photo sharing app and someone gave us millions of dollars and we could just work on it every day. You can't do that if you need to pay yourself. So revenue first sort of became important further down the line. And I think that, if you have revenue, I mean, it's such a dumb thing to say, but it's as I've gotten older, I've realized the truth in it. If you have revenue coming in and you don't have a lot of expenses, you have lots of options for most products, right? There's certain things that if you want to do, you really need massive resources, massive team. There's a lot money you need to do before you can make your first dollar. But in a lot of small software businesses, you can make your first dollar before you really spend a lot of money or hire a big team.
That is true. I do want to continue on that path, but before we move on, I want to go back to something you said earlier about your music business, the first one that you started, that you said it was a bad business. Why was it a bad business? What happened exactly?
Oh, well, that's probably a longer conversation.
If you don't mind unpacking that, it might be, you had mentioned PTSD already, but...
No. I actually wrote a blog post after my second one that essentially was me saying, please don't start another music business. Because the music industry is just a brutal space. Especially, the revenue model is shifting every few years. First it was CDs to digital, to iTunes, buying MP3s. With Napster, people stealing MP3s. Then it's to streaming, which has brought a lot of money in, but it's a totally different model. The artists that used to be able to go on tour and basically play for free because they could sell 30 CDs, which would make them $300, which is enough to pay for gas and a hotel room and a pizza before the next show. Now those people show up at the show and they say, I love this band. I'm going to stream them later. And the man literally doesn't leave the room with any money. And, when they get a couple hundred streams on Spotify, it's not like they're making any money from that. So the whole model has changed. That means musicians' ability to pay is very low. And that's essentially why it's really hard to be in business there, because you have two types of artists. You have people who are trying to become massive musicians, but they're struggling. They don't have any money. So to ask them to pay for a software service to save them time, they're like, I have time. It's not money. So they're not really willing to pay. Then you have another set of artists that have already become very successful, maybe signed with the record label, someone else is doing their stuff. And they're either wanting everything to be custom, or they think that your association with them is better for you than it is for them. And so you should give it to them for free. And so it's this weird thing that even when they have money to pay, they don't want to pay very much, or they don't want to pay at all. That's what I found. So I just don't think it's a great business. And then music listeners sort of aren't expecting to spend any money. They just pay their $10 a month to Spotify and they get all the music they want for free. So I don't know. I think when you're evaluating a business, if you want to do a small business, it's important to figure out where the money is going to come and how easy it's going to be to get. And if the market that you're going after is small and has a really low willingness to pay, it's very hard to build a business. If you want to build like a SaaS business off of musicians, it's just hard because there's just not a lot of people that are.
Yeah, that's a good point. How would one go about doing the right research? What is that right research to make sure there's money flowing in that space?
Well, I think, you can always try to do an assessment of how big the market is, right? This is where I think, as like a 25-year-old, I was like, there's millions and millions of musicians.
Right.
Okay, cool. Let's take podcasting actually as a better example, right? You go look out there, there's millions of podcasts. If you go to the podcast index, I think there's 5 million podcasts. Okay, well, how many of them are active? Active being, how many of them have more than one episode? That probably cuts it down to a much smaller amount, more than 4 episodes, right? Okay, how many of them have released an episode in the past 12 months? You start really narrowing the number down a lot. Okay, let's say there's 700,000 active podcasts. All right, well, how many of them have more than 100 listeners? And if you just dig into the data a little bit more and more, okay, well, here's how many podcasters are making money. So if we were going to charge them, here's how many that might be willing to pay. But I think the naive version of me from 10 years ago was like, there's millions of musicians. I can get X percent of that market, they'll pay me. If I can just get a small percentage to give me $20 a month, then I'll have a big business. But I didn't say out of those million, there's probably only 100,000 that are actually willing to pay anything. And most of those don't need what I'm offering, right? So I think that that's generally one way to do it. Another way is figure out where you are in the value cycle, which I found I did a business for NFT artists a few years ago, and taking Podpage. Podpage is a great business. It's a really wonderful product. It helps a lot of podcasters, and I think it's critical, but it also isn't necessarily like a step in. You don't like use it to pay the podcaster. So it's not in the middle of the money flow. Whereas Stripe or Patreon or one of those, you're in the money flow. And so you can actually make sure that you can charge because you're necessary for the person to make money. And I think that that's a big piece. A lot of people come out with products that are like, this will improve. This will be nice. This is a great thing that you should use. And I think you narrow your market down when you're only a nice to have. So, but if you're like, you need me to make money.
Right. Like an email template service versus like a literal email service provider, which is a part of a person's ecosystem that, a person with a software like that could charge monthly for to have as a part of their stack, essentially, versus like you said, a nice to have. So that's a great differentiator. What are you creating? And is it a nice to have, or is it if I don't have this, I'm going to suffer or have more time needed or need more people or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I really love that differentiator. So in the world of podcasting, we already just broke down some numbers. I think you're pretty darn close to 700,000, I would say, active. And then even within that, only a certain number having, more than hundreds of downloads. If you're in the thousands of downloads, you're up there for sure. So when we talk about the idea of saturation, no, it's not. And a lot of people continue to ask if it's too late to podcast or, all that kind of stuff. And when you break it down in a similar fashion, no, it's not at all. And nothing is saturated with top quality, top tier content, S tier content. But Podpage targets podcasters, and you created it despite their quote unquote maybe being less than expected numbers off the top. Tell me your thought process on how you built this. I know you said you built it for a friend, was it? And or that was something else. But anyway,
no, it's just
it was okay. So tell me your thought process on moving forward with it, despite maybe not a gazillion numbers of users potentially to use it.
Well, I think in music, the one big thing that I was part of was MySpace's rise and fall. And when MySpace fell apart, everyone realized that if you put all of your eggs in a platform's basket, you might lose all your eggs. All the record labels were paying millions of dollars to build these MySpace friend bases up. And then when MySpace fell apart, they're like, oh, we have to start over. So I used to speak at conferences during this whole time. And I said, build a website, put an email list up, get a direct connection with in that case, your fan. And so, and so I ended up building a website platform for musicians 10 years ago to do that. And so podcasting, I just didn't know much about it 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I was a listener, but I didn't know about sort of the back end technology or how the industry worked. And so I was looking for a friend's podcast, and I searched Google, and what came up was Apple link, Spotify link, platform links. He didn't have a website. And so I reached out and I said, why don't you have a website? And he said, I'm on Apple and Google. It's fine. And I was like, wow, I mean, I've seen this before in a very similar industry using similar platforms. And it just seemed like people don't realize how bad this could be. There's some people, there's some great podcasts out there, talking about building a website. But so I would go to a bunch of different podcasts and I said, why don't you have a website? And they said, well, WordPress is kind of hard, right? And I'm not a big WordPress. I don't have a lot of experience, but the more I learned about it, I was like, oh my God, it is really hard. And it's also claims to be free, but once you do what you're supposed to do, it actually is fairly expensive. So all those things sort of showed me there's an opportunity to build a better product for the people who want it. And there's also people who don't realize they need this, but probably will start realizing that over time. And so that's what got me started. The RSS feed being a public content feed makes it very easy to build something that has an amazing initial user experience, right? You just type in your podcast name, and in 10 seconds, we show you 15 different websites with your content on them. So the whole user experience is amazing. I was like, all right, is this a real business? And the answer of, is it a real business, is absolutely. Could be a real business. There's plenty of people out there. Is it a big business? I don't know. Would I raise venture capital for it? Absolutely not. Right? I kind of I put things in those tiers. It's is this the kind of business that investors would invest in? Absolutely not. Way too small of a market. But is it a good business for a small team or a solo founder? Absolutely. There's a lot of value that can be created and captured. And there's a lot of good that can be done for this community. And so that's kind of what pushed me along. But it really was sort of like a side hustle for a long time, and it just grew organically. And I just sort of had to let it grow on its own, as opposed to being out there trying to like spend a bunch of ad dollars to try to get people to use it. It really was reach out to podcasters, talk to them about their needs, show them something, see what they thought.
I know word of mouth has been a big part of this as well, and how people have shared it, which is always a great thing. I'm curious, how did you help people understand that this was no longer having a website for a podcaster? It was no longer a nice to have and actually a must have, because even in conversations with students on this side, it's still you technically don't need it, and it would be nice to have a website, but I'm too busy, and this is where, of course, the solution comes into play. But what did you do to help people go, yeah, this is actually a part of my tech stack for a successful podcast?
What I've been doing is I've been out there, I speak at all the conferences, I did website seminars, all the stuff that you do to pound the pavement to get the word out. I found, though, in general, that trying to convince someone that they need something is a lot of work if they don't already believe that they do. Being there when they realize that they need it is much easier. And so I put a lot more effort into that over the past few years. Like, I think a lot of people don't know they need a website, and eventually will come around. And I can't wait for that. But to try to convince people that they're wrong, basically, and that they don't understand it, it's been easier for me to sort of build the best product out there. And so when someone does come around and say, hey, I need a website for my podcast, and they go into a Facebook group and say, hey, I'm thinking about building this, what should I use? And 9 out of 10 things say, go use Podpage. It's way easier. Fostering that community, treating my customers really, really well, showing them, giving them something and them seeing firsthand, like, oh my God, this has made it so much easier. I have a new episode coming out next week with Pat. And before I used to I'd be like, here are all of the links that I need to send. But now I can just send one link to my website and say, like, just point people to the website. It'll get you to Spotify or Apple or wherever you want to go. Like, enough podcasters have had that kind of experience where they're sort of like a mini army now that just helped me. So that's what I love seeing. I love seeing when someone posts in a Facebook group, I'm thinking about building a website for my podcast. Do I really need one? My Buzzsprout page is fine. Like, do I need something else? I used to jump in there and try to help. Now I just stay out of it. And I watch the podcasters have a discussion about, what's necessary and what's not. And more often than not, people say, before, when it was WordPress and it took forever to build it and you needed to hire a designer and you needed to do all these plugins and things were breaking. They're like, before it was such a pain that I might have said, don't have one. Now Podpage makes it so easy. Just do that. It's just easy. And you'll have a well SEO and, all the other benefits of it. Yeah. The community, it's slower. You have to be patient, but stickier when the community is the one doing your marketing for you.
Beautiful. And well said. I want to go to these 12 different softwares that you created. I think you said within a year, and then Podpage being one of them, and obviously doing very well now. We'll get into the pricing structure and how you chose that and all that kind of stuff in a minute. But what was the difference between Podpage and these other 11 that you think that made Podpage successful and the others not?
Yeah. So when you build 12 things and launch 12 things in a year, and the launch was the biggest, you can build lots of stuff, but actually to put it out there into the world, the couple things happen. One is you have to come up with some sort of a framework to build them on. Otherwise, you can't start from scratch every time. So as I built, the last 4 were way easier than the first 8 because, the first one I had to build a login system or a billing system or whatever. And the last one kind of got that all for free. And so I think Podpage, if I remember correctly, was sort of in the middle to the end. One big difference between Podpage and a lot of the other ones, and they were all tiny ideas, right? Like Podpage was tiny. I mean, right now I'm having a hard time organizing all the features because it just does so much. But at the beginning, there was no login. It was just, you text me your RSS feed, I'll create a website for you and put it at your domain. There was no like dashboard or, it was mostly done but through DMs because I wasn't going to build a whole like user experience if people didn't actually want it. So I set the page up and then they'd use it for a few months. And then a lot of people would be like, I need to edit this. So it was pretty simple. And all the other ones, I mean, it was also around COVID. So I remember I did, a QR code menu site for restaurants. I did a way for a VC, like a venture capitalist, to build a website for their portfolio, like really dumb stuff. But it was just to get something out there. And ironically, like the VC, some of the code from the dumb VC website product that I built, I was able to move into Podpage, and that saved me like a few days of building them. So someone asked me this morning what the other ones were. I did a Twitter thread about it. I need to go back on it. But they were remarkably stupid and failed so quickly. One of the hardest things about building any piece of software is getting someone to invest time in setting it up. And so if someone comes to you and says, hey, I've got a great new to-do list app for you. You're like, well, I've got my to-dos and reminders on my phone, and really to move over to your thing, it's going to take a while. Getting someone to actually like enter content is hard. So with podcasting, that was a big advantage, where it was like, I just need an RSS feed and I immediately will get a full website. Like they didn't have to do anything. That was one big differentiator and helped it move a little bit faster. So it also was helpful that it was somewhat self-marketing. When you said, hey, I have a new website, at the bottom it says powered by Podpage. And so like, again, it takes a really long time for that kind of stuff to really move the needle, but it's better than, building someone an internal dashboard to manage their sales where that doesn't have any virality. No one knows that person's using it.
That's really cool. Running a business means legal questions are inevitable. Is this contract or agreement solid? What can I do if a client won't pay me? Am I set up properly for taxes? Well, rather than trying to navigate all of this on your own or searching endlessly online, imagine having a law firm on your side without the high hourly rates. That's exactly what Legal Shield's small business plans offer. With Legal Shield, entrepreneurs get access to real legal support, contract reviews, collection letters, guidance on business formation, and even help handling IRS audits. Members can book consultations, upload documents through the app, and work with a provider law firm that understands small business laws in your state. You also get proactive help on tax and trademark questions so you can stay ahead of legal risks. And if a client delays payment, Legal Shield can send professional collection letters to help you recover what you're owed, all for a fraction of what traditional attorneys charge. Go to LegalShield.com/SPI or call 833-570-9980 to learn more and get big business legal support without a big business budget. That's LegalShield.com/SPI. Hiring shouldn't be a hassle or a drain on your budget. Upwork is your one-stop shop to find, hire, and pay top freelance talent, saving you time and keeping costs in check all in one place. Companies at every stage turn to Upwork to get things done and find more flexibility in the way that they staff key projects and initiatives by assessing a global marketplace filled with top talent in IT, web development, AI, design, administration support, marketing, and more. And I've personally used them myself and can vouch for them. Posting a job on Upwork is easy. With no cost to join, you can register, browse freelancer profiles, get help drafting a job post, or even book a consultation. From there, you connect with freelancers that get you and can easily hire them to take your business to the next level. Upwork makes the entire process easier, simpler, and more affordable with industry-low fees. Post a job today and hire tomorrow with Upwork. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That is Upwork.com to post your job for free and connect with top talent ready to help your business grow. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com. Go there now. I want to know about the workload required to upkeep a business like this. That's not super huge, but it is obviously being used. How many users do you have at this point, and what is maintaining this business look like?
Last time I looked, it was like about 30,000 podcasters had signed up and tried it. And then I can't remember the number that it ended up even converting into a paid plan or what used to be our free plan, but 5 to 10,000 of those. The whole product is very much set it and forget it. And so we do a lot of support in the first month. You generally, if we're supporting customers, they have a lot of questions when they're setting it up, but they don't have a lot of questions moving on because it does everything automatically. It automatically pulls in your episodes, creates episode pages, pulls in your transcript, connects to YouTube, posts to Twitter. I mean, once you set it up, it just sort of does its thing. And so with that kind of a business, you tend to have a lot of, startup costs with each customer or startup support, but then it goes away. And so the crazy thing, the product obviously has gotten better over time or easier to use. And so we don't do a lot more customer support than we did 4 years ago, even though we have thousands and thousands of more customers because we have less questions because we've written more support articles and we've made the product easier to use. And we just need to support them for the first couple of weeks and then they kind of do their own thing. So from a operational standpoint, customer support is the only real thing. I mean, all tech has been solved with servers. You can sign up. You don't need to maintain your own servers or anything like that. And so for the most part, it's customer support and it's really not even a full-time job for someone. We have someone full-time doing it, but it's a very small part of their day. That's what I would consider like maintenance and upkeep. And then there's, do we want to build new stuff and keep improving the product? At the beginning of its life, there was an endless list of things to do because it barely did anything. And all these customers are coming in and saying, here's all the stuff we wanted. And we were just building whatever customers wanted. It's a fairly complete product at this point. And so when we add something like I'm about to roll out a bunch of new AI stuff, no one's really asked for that. I don't have to do that, right? People are happy with the product, but we've been trying to improve it. But I think one lesson I've learned over my career has been I used to just never stop adding features and just, we got to keep putting stuff in here. And in so many cases, the product was fine. And then because I wanted to add a bunch of stuff, I made it too complicated and actually made the product worse because no one needed all that other stuff. And so I think with the stage this is in, it doesn't need a ton of improvements. The dashboard doesn't need to be redesigned 5 times, probably like I've done it, right? Like it's a pretty much a passive business at this point. It could be, but it's hard because I like making things. So what I enjoy is actually like building things that make people's lives easier. And so with the AI stuff we're doing, it's a lot of people, 90% of people probably won't care about it, but the 10% that are really serious about their website and their podcast will have a lot of benefit from it.
That's amazing. That's so cool. I mean, software that is controlled growth can be really, really amazing. And gives you that flexibility, I imagine, in your schedule and time to spend with family and all that kind of stuff. I think we're still in an age where we feel like if we're not working, we're wasting time. And, I think this is a great example of a kind of business, a type of business. And you have software capabilities, but you don't have to be a software engineer to be able to do this. There's a lot of people and places you can hire to get a lot of these things done for you. And as you can see, you could run it with even a small team.
This is something that I've learned recently, or I've done recently, is that you just kind of hit the nail on the head, like spending time with family. You don't have to be doing stuff. I naturally am like, if it's the work day, I should be working. I should be adding features. I should be doing stuff. So 2 kind of like tangents. One is I built this other business a couple years ago, and I literally put Podpage for the most part in maintenance mode. I didn't add anything to it for a full year because I was like, this just needs to grow. This needs to spread. I can't do anything to push it forward. And so for a full year, I basically added nothing. And it grew really well. It wasn't, crazy growth. It was linear growth, but it just showed me, I was like, we did great customer support. That's all we did for a year. And people loved it. Then today, because I've gotten so much more involved and I'm adding so much stuff, I've actually had to build a spreadsheet that I did this a few months ago where I put 30-minute blocks for every hour of my week. And I assigned, what am I doing during that 30-minute block with generally. So like Saturdays and Sundays, those are family time. Certain part of the day is workout time. Certain part that we have date nights, right? And I was like, how much time do I spend with myself, with my wife, with my family, sort of as a unit, with my kids alone, working, sleeping? Like, what are all the things? This seems a little ridiculously detailed. It was pretty easy to build, but because I wanted to see like where are my holes, and what I found is I wasn't spending nearly enough time alone. I didn't have a lot of me time. All my time was for work or for family. And then also I was like, I spend a lot of time working. I don't need to, because the product does really well. I mean, it's not totally passive, but it could be. I choose to make it not passive. Choosing to make it not passive is great, but like 40 hours of non-passive maybe I'm really like giving up a huge opportunity I have right now to spend more time with my family or to spend more time with doing my own stuff. And so it's really hard for me, but I've had to really try to like, okay, this day of the week, this afternoon, no work. I'm going to go and learn something new or take a class or do something that's different, or want to spend this time taking my daughter out on a date, because like, I don't need Friday afternoon. I don't need to be working. I always say like, you never know how long a business is going to go. And there's very good chance in 5 years, maybe podcasting is taking a turn. Maybe AI is taking a turn. The web's, maybe this isn't needed. And I have to go work for Google or go get a job or do something else. I'm just like, at that point, if I look back and say, God, I had the most flexible schedule and I spent all my time working, I think I'd kick myself. So, but it's like that's a big part of like having to really be like, do I need to spend 40 hours? Could I spend 30 hours? I sit down every month and say, is all the time I spent worth it? Could I have done that in less amount of time? Okay, well, if that's possible, let's try to do that next month. It's a big thing.
It's such an important discussion to have, because we often don't even catch ourselves spending so much time working until sometimes it's too late. And for a lot of people, it is. Our kids are already grown up, or their relationships are faltering, or whatever the case may be. And I think it's a great reminder for people to maybe do an audit. Maybe you don't have to necessarily spreadsheet the whole thing out, but maybe you do, to have that realization like you did. Did you get to the point where you're creating like pie charts and line graphs and all that kind of stuff with that data, or no?
No, it was no, it was just a percentage. It was just how many hours do I have in the week? How many hours do I spend doing each of these things? For me, it was easier to do it visually, because I could just say like, okay, from like 9 to 9:30 every day I work out. Okay, cool. I can just put a W in that cell every day. And
yeah,
the hard thing, and I'm sure you deal with this too, is whenever you run your own thing, I didn't feel like this when I worked for Google or other companies, because there's only so much you can do alone. But when you run your own thing, there's never a time. I mean, I have a list of 100 marketing things I could do for Podpage at any point. So like, given the time, all the work will fill that vacuum. So you have to really protect it. Otherwise, I could work, every hour, every day for the entire week. And a lot of people do. If I was in my 20s, I probably would do that. But in my 40s, I'm like, I just don't need, I need to block time out for other things than work. I just think that's a bigger challenge when you run your own thing, because there's never a time where you don't have something else you could be doing.
For sure. At least at a 9 to 5, you clock out at 5, right? And then you're done, versus you could be up at night and know that you have another thing to do for your business, and Parkinson's law comes into play and you fill it with the next thing on your list. How do you prioritize all those things on that list to decide, okay, of all of this is the thing I'm going to be working on?
I'm trying to get better at that even after 20 years. I love building. So I always opt to being like, oh, I should make this feature because people would love this. And I would love building it. And I don't think I should probably make the marketing page better. I'll build features and not actually put them on our marketing page or anywhere. Like no one even knows that I built them because I have so much fun building and launching them. So it'll be in the dashboard in some corner of the dashboard. But someone, I read a review of me versus a competitor, and they listed a few features. They're like, well, this competitor does these things. I was like, I've been doing those things for 2 years. And I looked all over my marketing website. I was like, oh, yeah, you really have to dig to find those. And so I'm trying to get better. So what I'm doing now is I'm trying to sit down and be like, okay, what for each week of the month, what is the set of technology improvements that we're going to make? And then what are the set of marketing improvements we're going to make? And like, it's not okay to not have one of those sides filled. And also we need to make sure that they're big enough where they're going to be meaningful to a user base, and not just like, because I can spend a year making tiny improvements that no one ever notices. With the sort of like banner, like when you log in, you feel like I just got my time unlocked because they've added this feature. Those I tend to not brag about as much.
Brag away though. I mean, those are the big things that, can change a person's workflow and share and all that kind of stuff. When you see a review, because in the software space, you're likely to see reviews, people using it and talking about it, comparing it to other comparable tools. How do you approach that? Because in some cases, myself included, I mean, that stuff can get to my head in a very negative way if I let it. And then others are just like, I don't even want to see any of that. But then if you don't see it, how can you take feedback? How do you balance feedback and the consumption of reviews, both positive and negative?
I think one thing that is nice to do at the beginning of any project is to try to be really honest about where it fits in the ecosystem of tools that are out there right now and who your ideal customer is. Again, this is going back down to whittling down the market. When I started Podpage, I doubt I was like, I want Pat Flynn to use this, right? Because you are at a certain level of the career, you have a certain amount of needs for what your website would be, right? Like you have a lot of other businesses. If I looked at your website, I wouldn't say, oh, Podpage can replace this. But a lot of people just say like, I want everyone to use it. And so what I do with Podpage at the beginning, and I do with most products, is like, okay, what's the real part of who was using this? And you can widen that over time, but at any stage, like you're probably not solving everyone's problem. And if you're solving everyone's problem in the market, the product isn't going to work in my experience. It's like, you should narrow in. So with Podpage, I always started by saying, well, you start with no website, but most hosts give you a website. And that's honestly good. I mean, I tell tons of podcasters who are asking me if they should use Podpage. I'm like, no, you're so small. Just use that until you get frustrated with it. And then move over to Podpage. And so they say, so that's good for now. Use Podpage. And then at some point, you're probably going to want a ton of customization, a ton of other stuff. You'll need to move to WordPress. And I will celebrate that day and help you move off of Podpage. And so having sort of like that, we fit in the middle perspective. I think a lot of review, if someone writes a review and says, oh, Podpage isn't that customizable, I say, no, it's not. By design, that's what WordPress is for. Or like for a new podcaster, Podpage is too expensive. It's like, yes, we are. That's why you get you use your Buzzsprout or your Libsyn site. And so there's not a lot of reviews that frustrate me because most of the criticism on the product is sort of baked in and designed in for the market that we're going, part of the market that we're going after.
So the comments are warranted. I mean, it's the truth. And you're like, yeah, it is. But I love that. And I imagine because you take that approach, there are some people who potentially could upgrade to WordPress, but they don't because they love you so much and they want to stick around. Is that true?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with Podpage is it's not like point and click customization and you can't change every pixel on the page. The goal is like just set colors you want, set the general frame you want, and it does everything it needs to do. It doesn't break. If you want tons of customization or plugins or all this stuff, yeah, move to WordPress. That's great. I'd say it hasn't happened a lot. But half of the times it's happened, they've come back because they go to WordPress, and WordPress, they have a beautiful site. It looks better than Podpage because it's more like customized to them and it's got cool widgets and stuff. And then a year later, they're like, God, it's a pain in the ass to keep up to date, or it keeps breaking, or the plugins aren't working like I want them to, or I miss that Podpage did these 3 things. And then half the people sticking, they're awesome over there. So it depends, but I definitely think that people are convinced they need something more complicated, then use something easy. This isn't just Podpage, this is in general. And then they're fine with it being not as complicated. I always remember this being like criticism for the iPhone from Android people. Android people are like, oh, on Android, you can do all these customizations and you can tweak all these things and you don't have to just use the App Store. You can download from anywhere. And a lot of the people on the App Store are like, yeah, that sounds great. I don't need any of that. I just want it to work.
Exactly. That's cool. Brendan, while we finish up here, I do want to ask you about how you landed on your pricing structure. A lot of software developers who are new are builders and they want to solve these problems. But then when it comes to, the actual business part of the equation, they often just are in the dark. Do you have any advice or tips for those in that position for putting the right price on something so that it, is able to keep the business afloat, but also is just attractive still? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. How I came up with mine is probably not the same answer as what I would advise someone else to do,
okay,
at least at the beginning. So, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to think, how many people are you going after? So if you're going after the regular consumer, and there's hundreds of millions of potential customers, charging, what Loom or Calendly or some of these things charge for like $5 to $10 a month, you can build a really nice business off of that. But you have to be going after massive amounts of people. When I started Podpage, you could sign up for the basic plan for $5 a month, and I regretted it almost instantly because I was chasing people down whose like credit cards has expired for $5 a month. I eventually just wiped the whole. I then was like, at least you have to pay me for a year at a time because this is just not worth it. I think when coming up with pricing, like target market size is really, really important because if you're not going to have a lot of customers, you need to charge more. If you're adding value to their business, you can charge a little bit more. I also think starting high, it's counterintuitive, but like I built businesses that charge $5 a month. I've built businesses that charge thousands of dollars to use the software. And God, the businesses that charge thousands of dollars to use the software are so great. It just unlocks so much. I'm not saying to charge thousands, but when you can charge a lot more, you can spend more money on marketing. You can spend more money, like Google Ads potentially works for you because Google Ads are expensive. If the ticket price people are paying you is high, then you can afford to acquire customers for more money. But if you got a $10 a month thing, you're just not able to spend money on acquisition. And at the beginning, it's nice to have that if you can have it. So I think really try to charge as much as possible for whatever you're doing. And then you can always scale down. Because if you're really adding value, it's so much easier to have one user paying you $100 a month than 10 users paying you $10 a month. Less customer support. If for most products, there's some things that require network effects and that kind of stuff, maybe you want more users. But in my experience, if you can get one person to pay you 10x, it's better to then have 10 people pay you, 1/10. And you have to internally be like, you're going to see a lot of negative reviews about how expensive you are. Whatever, again, it's choosing who you want to use the product. So in general, I think the more you can charge, the better. You'll get more sophisticated customers. They'll be kinder to you, in my experience. They'll be more patient. They'll be exceptionally happy when you help them do their job because you've made they've invested in you and they're getting a return on their investment. And people love being smart and being like, oh, I made such a good decision. So that's in general. Now, I say that having Podpage is cheap. And there's the reality of you have to know who your market is and how much money they have to spend. And so at Podpage, we have a plan that I forget how much it is now. It's on the lower end, and we have a higher end plan. I think the higher end plan could be actually a lot more expensive. I always feel bad charging people for things. But I think what we've done over time is we've raised our prices 3 times in 4 years. And we've gone to the community, and we've let people who signed up for us at the beginning keep their old prices. So we still have people paying us $5 a month for some Podpage stuff. But we've said, hey, in the last year, we added like 150 features. We have this whole new thing that it didn't do before. So we're going to update our pricing. And then we also last year introduced a higher end plan that we didn't even offer before with a whole new set of stuff. So you can always adjust it over time, but it's way easier to reduce prices over time than raise them.
That's the Tesla model, is to start high, right? Get all the higher users in and the people who will become fans and offer feedback, and then you make it cheaper over time as systems get better, as parts get cheaper, et cetera. But in this case, I love the idea of the multiple tiered prices. Everybody should go check out Podpage. If you go to smartpassiveincome.com/podpage, that's our affiliate link. The basic plan I'm looking right now is $12 a month. That's for solving a big problem like that and just kind of making it work. It's a huge value to a podcaster's repertoire. And so I can see why this is successful. You know, as somebody who's been teaching a lot of podcasters, the website is a big pain in the butt that is, you should have one. And this makes it easy. Is there any final piece of advice you would offer for those who are diving into software and from your experience having created multiple things that have gone very well, some that didn't? Perhaps a final parting word from your perspective for anybody diving into this space.
It's cliche at this point. I think everyone knows this, but especially in those early days, just as much one-on-one conversation with potential customers or with early customers, the better. I mean, I just don't think, I think a lot of people go out there with the assumption that they know the solution to the problem they're trying to solve. And a lot of times, directionally, you're right. But once you actually start talking to people, these little tiny changes that your customers can tell you about in those early days, you know, it's just a tiny little 1% pivot in the first week, but 4 years later, that you would have been way off had you not made those adjustments. And I think, you know, with Podpage, it started with me DMing podcasters and just being like, can I show you a link that I made for you? Can you just give me feedback on what you think of it? Like, I wasn't even asking them to sign up or asking them for money. I was just like, how does this website look to you? Do you like it? And just trying to make it as low friction as possible to get some feedback in the door. And then as they said, yeah, well, can I actually use this? Then it's like, I started a Slack channel for a bunch of early customers. I was like, hey, you'll have access to me at any point. You can give feedback in, you can talk to each other, like trying to get as much feedback in those early days. Because if you start noticing your community cares, then you're onto something. I've done a lot of products where I'm like, let me get feedback. And they're like, oh, this is kind of neat. And then you write them the next day and you're like, all right, what do you think about this? And they don't write you back for 5 days. And it's like, oh, you don't care. This isn't something you care about. But if you can, by talking to customers, you can sense, do they care about this? Are they excited about it? And then you know what you sort of keep going on.
Man, good stuff, Brendan. Thank you so much for this and for today. This is going to definitely be one that I think people will re-listen to in the archive, especially if they start going down this path. Appreciate you so much. So Podpage is where you want to go if you need a website for your podcast, smartpassiveincome.com/podpage. Where else can people go to follow what you're up to? Is there a centralized location for the dozens of things that you seem to get involved with over time?
I have always been fairly active on Twitter, X, and my handle is @Mulligan. I'm actually a little less just in general on social media right now. It's part of my more me time. It's like, what am I doing in my life that I could cut out for a little bit? So I haven't actually been on X for a bit, but I spend a lot of time there. If you want to get in touch with me directly, if you go to Podpage and just click the button that helps get customer support in the bottom right and just say, I want to talk to Brendan, that's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Nice, man. This has been great. Thank you so much for this, and congrats on the success with Podpage and all future projects.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Brendan. Again, you can find his stuff over at smartpassiveincome.com/podpage. And yeah, if you need a website for your podcast and you want to make it quick and easy, go to that website. And thank you again. That's an affiliate link, which means we get a little commission if you go through that for us. Thank you. Now, definitely check out the show notes as well, smartpassiveincome.com/session795. And Brendan, thank you so much for the time and the wisdom and all the stories. Definitely inspiring, and especially those of you who are getting into software. And as many of you might know, I am dabbling a little bit in a new piece of software as well. So this was just as helpful for me as hopefully it was for you too. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and looking forward to serving you in the next episode. Cheers. Thank you so much for listening to the Smart Passive Income podcast at smartpassiveincome.com. I'm your host, Pat Flynn. Sound editing by Duncan Brown. Our senior producer is David Grabowski, and our executive producer is Matt Gartland. The Smart Passive Income podcast is a production of SPI Media and a proud member of the Entrepreneur Podcast Network. Catch you next week. Look, I get it. You want to grow your business, but trying to sell to hundreds or even thousands of people gets very exhausting very fast. But what if you could sell at scale with a simple, powerful quiz? ScoreApp helps you sell to more people without adding more to your plate. You build a quiz or assessment that your audience actually wants to take. Then they answer a few quick questions and get a personalized result right away. It shows them where they're at and what they need to do next and how you can help. And you build huge amounts of trust before you make even a single offer. No hard sell, no chasing leads, just value at scale. Get 50% off the first 3 months using the discount code SPI. All you have to do is just head to scoreapp.com/SPI. Again, that's scoreapp.com/SPI. Hey there, quick pause here because I have to tell you about a tool that completely transforms the podcasting workflow, Riverside. I get it. I used to juggle multiple platforms just to record one podcast episode. It was exhausting. Zoom for recording, Audacity for editing, and then a bunch of different apps just to create clips and social posts. I've tried other ones as well. They were okay, but they were clunky and super time-consuming. That's where Riverside has massively helped. I can do it all in one place, recording, editing, repurposing, one platform, one streamlined flow. I just log in, record with my guests no matter where they are in the world, and just like that, studio-quality audio and high-resolution video all in one. And get this, even if your Wi-Fi glitches, Riverside records locally on your device so everything sounds and looks crystal clear. But here's my favorite feature, Riverside's AI editing tool. You can remove silences and filler words with just one click, hours saved. With Magic Clips, Riverside also automatically finds the best moments and turns them into ready-to-post videos for YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram, all without the extra editing. So if you're looking to level up your production quality and simplify your workflow, go to smartpassiveincome.com/Riverside and use code SMART to get 1 month free on the Pro plan. That's smartpassiveincome.com/Riverside, promo code SMART. It's built by creators for creators, and I think you're going to love it.